there's a huge disaster at the border, and both the Biden administration and the media are covering it up because they realize how crushing and damaging these images are of essentially third world style slums and huts being set up right in Texas. And people, urinating and defecating everywhere, and you've just got the kind of conditions that one would see in a favela in Brazil or a slum in Kolkata. It's a horrific scene, and so now they're pretending like, gee, we've hired some planes, we're sending people back, we're doing what Mayorkas calls expedited removal. Now, they're not doing it. The simple truth of it, expedited removal, doesn't mean what the word says. This is part of the kind of Orwellianism of our kind of illegal immigration vocabulary. Because what does expedited removal mean? Expedited removal you think it means that you have to go. But expedited removal means that you can actually stay once you ask for asylum. That's what it means. You're removed from the facility and allowed to stay. So the majority of these migrants, true, most of the single men who come are being sent back. But that is a small minority of the people who are coming. Why? Because most of them on the other side are being counseled by immigration lawyers, leftists, either South American leftists or American leftists, who tell them, listen, if you want to stay in America, first of all, you've got to tear up your ID card from Mexico or Chile or Brazil. You've got to pretend like you're a refugee when you're in no man's land. You're in search of a place. You got to do that. So it's all a staged event. Number two, when you show up, you got to show up with some kids. And so think of the encouragement, the inducement this is going to give to trafficking. So on the one hand, you have the Supreme Court basically affirming a decision out of Texas that says remain in Mexico. But the Biden administration is interpreting that to mean that only single men need to be sent back and everybody else can be loopholed in effect to stay. So Biden is, I won't say disregarding the Supreme Court, but using the latitude of administrative enforcement to basically say, the court is asking us to do this, and in a narrow sense, we're going to do that. Some of these guys are going to be sent back, but for the others, and in fact, the Biden administration has chartered with a company, it's called Aero Airways, colloquially known as ICE Air. ICE Air, why? Because when these guys are rounded up by ICE, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Authority, they're basically put on airplanes, this private chartering aircrafts, and they're dispatched all over the country. I'm now quoting ICE Buffalo Field Office Director Tom Feely. Basically, all we're doing is catching them at the border, shipping them to the interior, releasing them, and getting more, and then releasing them, and getting more, and then releasing them. This is what's going on under Biden. And he says if you oppose this policy, he says leaders of local field offices, ICE guys, are forced to, quote, play the game, because if they don't, they get retaliation from headquarters higher up. No promotion for you, no bonuses for you. Listen, this is our policy. You better do what we say. So you've got this vicious attempt by the Biden administration to kind of flagrantly sidestep the immigration laws, the Supreme Court's rulings, and the will of the American people. You can't imagine, and they must know that Americans looking at this are like, we're not okay with this. But the Biden solution is, listen, we got a lot of allies in the media, and just as in Afghanistan, our strategy was let's move on. What if we don't show Americans what's going on? What if they can't see? Now, true, you might have suddenly a Chilean guy shows up in your neighborhood, and this is actually happening, by the way, all over the country. What happens is these flights are normally at night. So the illegals are deposited into different parts of the country, generally when people can't see them, but then they suddenly just show up. And the Biden administration is hoping that people kind of won't mind. Well, it's only a handful of people, only a few families. So they're dispersing these people all over the country. It's all part of a despicable and nefarious scheme, really to change, I would say, the configuration of the American population, and they're doing it against our will. Let's remember that we are part of a social compact in which these changes can be made, but they have to be made, quote, with the consent of the governed. The Biden administration obviously doesn't believe that. They're giving us not what we want, but what we don't want, and they're daring us to do something about it.